Hey there, friends, it's Laurie. I'm so happy you stopped by because today I'm sharing 3 new Christmas DIYs. I used Dollar Tree supplies and just a couple of things that I had on hand. As always, I hope you have fun crafting with me, so let's get busy. Getting started, I'm using a 10-inch wooden star from the Dollar Tree and I'm removing the hanger. I'm painting my Santa with 3 different acrylic paints, a red, a black, and a tan. To mimic Santa's boots, I'm painting the bottom of my stars black. With that complete, I'm painting the 2 ends of the upper star with my tan acrylic paint to make Santa's hands, and then the top of the star to make Santa's face. To finish up, I'm using my red acrylic paint and filling in Santa's body. To add on Santa's beard and mustache, I'm using one of the mop heads from the Dollar Tree. I'm using 14 strands and mine pulled out easily. If yours won't pull out, you can remove the top of the mop head or just cut them directly from it. Now that I have them all removed, I'm folding each strand in half and cutting it. When I'm done cutting all 14, I'll have 28 strands in total. I'm placing the strands on a piece of waxed paper, one next to the other. I'm trying to keep the ends as even as possible, but if they're not perfect, not to worry because we're going to end up giving them a trim. Now that I'm done, I'm folding the last one in half to find my center point. I'm attaching them all together using a white chenille stem, or sometimes it's called a pipe cleaner. I added a generous amount of hot glue down the center of my strands and then placed down my chenille stem. Quickly, while the glue was still hot, I folded each of the strands around the chenille stem. I patted each one down as I was adding them to make sure they stuck in place. I made sure they were all tight next to each other, and then I cut off the 2 ends. Be sure to keep one because we'll be using it later. I followed Santa's face line with my glue gun and then attached down the beard. You can always leave the beard as is. I like mine to be a bit fuller, so I started pulling all of the strands apart. Now that I'm done, to clean Santa's beard up, I'm using my scissors and I'm giving it a trim. On the top part of his head and the sides, I'm cutting it a bit shorter because that will hide under his hat. To make Santa's mustache, I'm folding one of the mop strands in half and cutting it, and then I'm folding both strands in half and cutting those. I'm attaching them together using the short white piece of cut chenille stem. I wrapped it around the center of the strands and then twisted it together tightly. Now that it's attached together, just like the beard, I'm separating it into individual strands. Now, just like the beard, I'm using my scissors and I'm trimming off the ends to make them look a little neater. To attach them, I'm adding some hot glue onto Santa's face just above the beard. For his nose, you can use one of the wooden beads from the Dollar Tree. I'm actually using one that I had on hand and I painted it the same tan color. To attach it, I placed some hot glue in the center of Santa's mustache and placed it down. I'm giving my Santa a mouth by using one of the small red beads, and these came from the Dollar Tree as well. I parted the beard just under the nose, added on some hot glue, and then attached the bead. For Santa's eyes, you can always paint on 2 little black dots. I dug a couple of black buttons out of my button jar and I'm going to use those instead. I placed down 2 dots of hot glue just above his nose and attached on the buttons. I wanted to share with you today that I'm participating in my monthly friend group collab, and it's being hosted by my sweet friend Liana from Liana DIY. This month, our guest host is Tracy from Country Charm by Tracy. Both of these women have amazing channels that you will love, and you can check them out along with my other crafty friends. I'll have the playlist linked below in my description. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below, leaving me a thumbs up, and to all my returning friends, you know I am always so happy to see you. To make Santa's hat, I'm using one of the small sparkly tree skirts, and I found this at the Dollar Tree. It already has a slice in the center, and I'm cutting a 14-inch piece. I'm making a cone shape, and I'm folding one side over about 4 inches. I'm then pulling the other side to meet it so that the top forms a point, and I'm folding the extra fabric under. I'm first adding some hot glue between the faux fur and attaching that together. I added hot glue onto the side and turned the fabric into a hat. I placed it down on Santa's head, pulling down both sides, and then attached it in place with my glue gun. To cover up the end point on Santa's hat, I'm using one of the white pom-poms from the Dollar Tree. I added some hot glue, folded the hat over, and attached the pom-pom to the end. I'm cutting 4 pieces of 6-inch faux fur from the tree skirt. I'm adding a line of hot glue just over Santa's boots and placing down the faux fur. I added it to both arms the exact same way. Now that I have it attached to the front, I turned my Santa over and attached the ends onto the back. Now that I know I have enough fur left over, I'm adding another piece onto the front of Santa's hat. I wrapped the fabric around Santa's head to get my measurement and cut off another piece. I want it to be wider than the original piece, so I cut away the stitching and I opened it up. I added hot glue to the existing white fur and then wrapped the extra piece around. I'm adding on Santa's bell by using some black satin ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I cut a piece long enough and then glued it around his middle. I'm attaching 2 small ivy leaves that I had on hand onto his hat. To mimic holly berries, I'm using 2 of the small red pom-poms from the Dollar Tree pack, and I'm attaching them onto the ivy. To finish up, I'm adding a hanger onto my Santa. I cut a piece of Christmas ribbon and attached it to the back of his hands. And with that, he's ready for the holidays. To start my Christmas Tree Farm sign, I'm using a 5.5 by 11 inch piece of wood from the Dollar Tree. I found this in the craft department and I'm painting the front and the sides with my white acrylic paint. I'm going to put that aside to dry, and now I'm using a 12-inch wooden arrow from the Dollar Tree, and I found this in the craft department as well. I need it to be completely flat, so I removed the hangers and the staples that held it on the back. I'm making my Christmas sign rustic, so I'm painting the arrow with some brown acrylic paint. My white board and arrow have dried, but before I attach them together, I'm adding on an accent. I'm using some black acrylic paint and adding a border around both pieces. I'm definitely not doing the neatest job, and I didn't add any to the bottom of the white board because the arrow will be covering it. I gave them a chance to dry, and now to add on that rustic vibe, I'm using a piece of heavy grit sandpaper, and I'm sanding off most of the black. When I'm done with the edges, I'm moving into the center, and I'm sanding that off a bit as well. I'm attaching the arrow to the board using my E6000. I added a generous amount of glue to the bottom of the board and attached the arrow. I made sure the two ends matched up and that the front of the arrow was covering the board. For the letters on my sign, I'm using some stickers from the Dollar Tree. They're actually slightly raised and they have a bit of a plastic coating. I spelled out the word Tree Farm and I painted them with the same brown acrylic paint that I did the arrow. When they were dry, I placed them on my sign, making sure to leave a 2-inch space between them. Once I had my placement, I went back and attached them with my E6000. I'm using 3 wooden tree ornaments from the Dollar Tree as the Christmas trees on my sign. I painted all 3 with my green acrylic paint. I'll be adding stars to the top of my trees, but because they're a little bit smaller, I'm snipping off the top edges. As a simple accent, I'm using some gold acrylic paint and adding a dot to the end of each of the trees. I waited for the paint to dry, and now once again I'm using my sandpaper and I'm sanding the edges and the centers. I'm making a rustic sign, but you can always skip the sanding and just leave the colors bright. For the top of my trees, I'm using 3 foam stars, and I picked this pack up at Michael's. I painted them with the same gold acrylic paint, and I attached them to the top of the trees using my E6000. I'm attaching my first star, first placing down some E6000, and then attaching the tree, making sure that the star is in the center of the 2 words. I'm attaching my next 2 trees, flush with the bottom, and slightly overlapping the center tree. To finish up, I'm using an 18-inch piece of Dollar Tree nautical rope. I placed E6000 on the back and then attached it. And with that, my rustic tree farm sign is complete. To make my 2 scoop snowman, I'm starting with a 2.5-inch flower pot from the Dollar Tree. They sell them in a 3-pack, but I'm only using one, and this will become my ice cream cone. There's a little hole on the bottom, and I want to cover it up, so I'm using one of these wooden circles. I picked this package up at Michael's. I added some hot glue to the bottom and attached it, and you can always cut out a small piece of cardboard. For my snowman, I'm using 2 plush snowballs from this Dollar Tree 3-pack. To help the snowballs stand up straight, I'm using a wooden skewer, and I'm pushing it through the center of both. I then added a little hot glue between the two to help hold them in place. I held them in place for a couple of seconds and then snipped off the end of the skewer. I attached them to the pot, adding some to the bottom and the inside edges. I placed them inside until the skewer touched the bottom. Then snipped the excess off of the top. I'm using a black children's sock from the Dollar Tree to make my snowman's hat. I folded the ends of the sock over 2 times to make a wide brim. It's now as easy as slipping it over the top of the snowman's head. It sits pretty tightly on his head, but I did add some hot glue on the back to help hold it in place. For his eyes, I dug through my button jar and found 2 small black buttons, but you can pretty much use anything for his eyes. I added 2 dots of hot glue onto his face and attached them. To make his nose, I'm using a wooden skewer, and I cut about 2 inches off of the pointy end. I painted it with orange acrylic paint and hot glued it under his eyes. For the scarf, I'm using a leftover piece of fabric. Mine's in Christmas plaid, and I tied it around his neck. After I had it in place, I did give the tails a little trim. I cut a small square out of the trimming, and I hot glued that onto his hat. Instead of buttons, I'm using 2 small green bells, and these came from the Dollar Tree. I once again used my hot glue gun and attached both on the front. To finish up, I'm adding on some arms, and I went outside and cut 2 small twigs from a branch. I added a dot of hot glue on both sides and pushed them into the snowball. My 2 scoop snowman was super easy to make, and he'd look really cute sitting on a tiered tray. Here we are at the end of the video. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I hope you had fun making these Christmas DIYs. Be sure to check out my friends on the playlist, and if you're new here and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. I hope you have an amazing day, stay safe, be happy, and I will see you soon. Bye, everybody!